Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Aleph of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 31. So, what does this Daf talk about? So, movable ohels. Can you have an ohel if it moves? Is it considered an ohel if it moves? Well, stay tuned to find out. What else? Can you put your ayruv on a grave? If you're making an ayruv tchumen, can you put that on a grave? Stay tuned to find that out too. And then lots of different specific items you can or cannot use for an ayruv. Now, this is going to be reminiscent of a discussion that we had on Daf Mem Zayin of Masechta Brachos at the beginning of the 7th parak, as well as it came up in Masechta Shabbos as well. And now it's going to come up in Ayruvin. It should be familiar. So here we go, friends. And then at the end we talk about a little bit about like making shliachs to put down your ayruv for you. So that's interesting. Friends, let's go weiter. So we're on Daf Lamed Amud Beis, about 7-8 lines from the bottom. There's a 2 dots. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ap Beis HaKvaris. So Rabbi Yehuda says that a Kohen can even make an Ayruv Tchumen in a cemetery. Now, obviously the question is, well, how is he going to get there to put it in the cemetery? How's he going to get it out of the cemetery? Like, what's the deal? So, says the Gemara, interesting. So the Gemara says that the reason why a Kohen can put his Ayruv Tchumen in a cemetery is because, well, he can always put himself in some kind of a crate or a carriage or a closet, some kind of enclosed box kind of thing, and get into the graveyard that way. Okay. Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that an ohel that moves is still considered an ohel. And it's like the following machlokas tanaim. That if somebody goes into the lands of the nations, I guess anywhere outside of Israel, in some kind of a enclosed box that will serve as your ohel. Alright. So Rebbe Matame, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Matayr. So Rebbe says that hack is a failed attempt. According to Rebbe, that won't work. If you have like something that moves, I guess like a car theoretically could fall into this, although I wonder if there are other issues because it's like metal. I don't know. But yeah, Rebbe says either way, some kind of movable ohel is not an ohel for tuma purposes. And Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says that no, it does work, and therefore you're going to remain tar. So if you want to go outside of Israel, use like some kind of airplane or something, I guess. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, of course, is Rabbi Yehuda's son. So I guess that they're in line on this. But my kamiflage, and what exactly is the machlokas? Mar savar ol zaruk lav shmei ohel, umar savar ol zaruk shmei ohel. That Rabbi holds that a movable ohel is not an ohel, and therefore it's not going to save you from tumas hames. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda holds that a movable ohel is a good ohel and will save you from tumas hames. Tanya, we're learning a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda. Now, this talks about not making it doesn't talk about making an ayruv in a cemetery. It talks about just walking up to, like, let's say you have a random grave somewhere, okay? And then you take your ayruv food and you put it on the grave, okay? So, Rabbi Yehuda says, Me'arvin l'kohen tahor b'truma tahora b'kever. Interesting. So, a kohen who is tahor can take truma that is tahor, and he can put it on a grave, and that is where he's going to leave his ayruv. Okay, fine. So let's say halfway between, let's say I guess like at the 2,000 amma mark outside of his city, there's like a grave there. It's like a big tombstone. Figures he could take some food, mazon shtei sudis. He'll put it on this tombstone, and he'll leave it there, and that's where his ayruv is going to be. Okay, so how's he getting there? So in this case, it's just a lone grave, like in the middle of nowhere, I guess. So you wouldn't necessarily really need to like go in a box or anything. But I think that the point is that meaning I think that the important part is really the next part of the question, which is, meaning even if we're going to say that like he can go to a cemetery because he'll go in a shida teva or migdal to some kind of box, but there's still going to be the fact of the matter is, v'kevan de'achta itamila. But the fact of the matter is, forget about him for a second. When you take this food and you put it on the grave, the food itself is going to become tummy, right? You have the tuma. Right? I think this Gemara came up somewhere. It must have come up in Masechta Shabbos, I think. That, what's it called? That the tumah just kind of goes up to the sky. And therefore, if the food is on top, of the grave, well, it's going to be affected by the tumah sames. So the Gemara answers, B'shelo huchshira, o shenilosha b'mei peris. So Gemara gives two options. Either this is food that had never gotten wet, and therefore wasn't mukhshir l'kabel tumah. So therefore, even if you put it on top of the grave, it won't become tummy. Or the other option is that, let's say it's like some kind of dough-based food, but instead of using water, you used fruit juice. So May Paris would not be machshir this stuff l'kabel tumah. I feel like this came up in Masechta Shabbos. Ve'echi ma'isila. Okay, fine. So we're like addressing, there's like lots of different factors over here, and we keep on addressing one at a time. So how's he going to get there? So, well, in this case, it's just like a lone grave, so it's not really an issue to get there. You could just walk there, really. Now, but what about the food? You're going to put it on top of it, it'll become tummy. It's talking about where it's not mukhshir l'kabel tumah. Okay. Now, the next question is, now, how is he going to retrieve it from this grave, right? Because if he just kind of sticks his hand over it, well, then he'll be making an ohel on top of the mace, and he's going to become an avatuma. So, b'pshutei kle'etz, d'lo makabli tuma. So when he retrieves the item, he's going to use some kind of like stick, some kind of piece of wood that doesn't have a receptacle, and therefore it's not makabel tuma. So there you go. But v'hakam ma'ahil. So, but still, even when you take this piece of wood and you put it over the grave, well, it's going to create, the wood itself is going to be creating an ohel. It's going to be like a roof over this grave. And by you holding this wood, which is an ohel, you are going to become tameh. So the Gemara answers, that he is holding it on like the thin part, which meaning the part that is over the grave is the thin part that is less than a tefach, and therefore it doesn't actually create an ohel. Okay, fine, very good. So it's basically this grave. It's not in a graveyard, so the kohen can kind of walk up to it. We're talking about food that is not mukhshir l'kabel tumah. When he retrieves it, he's going to use a wooden kli that is less than a tefach, so it's not going to create an ohel, and it's also not itself going to become tummy because it's pshutei kle'etz. And like this, you can have your very, very fancy, albeit risky, ayruv with your kohen and truma and kevers. Okay, very nice. Well, I hope it was worth it. But if that's the case, then what's the rabbi's problem with it, right? Meaning, right, this seems to be Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says that this situation would work. Apparently the rabbis argue and say that you would not be able to do this. Why? What's the problem? We just basically answered any question you could possibly throw at us. So the Gemara answers, Kasavi also liknos bayis bisuria no. Gemara answers, well, the thing is that this grave is asur ba'ana. This kever, this grave is asur ba'ana. You can't get benefit from this kever. And the thing is, when you're going to basically make your ayruv over here, so now you're gonna be able to like travel and stuff on Shabbos. And that's going to be, or at least a little further, and that's going to be ana, a benefit, and you're basically using this grave to get benefit. Okay? So, Mechlal Rabbi Yehuda Savar Mutter, but does that imply that Rabbi Yehuda says that you would be allowed to get benefit from this grave? Doesn't he also say that it's asur ba'ana? So the Gemara answers, Kasavar Mutter mitzvahs lav le'anos nitnu. So the Gemara answers, well, according to Rabbi Yehuda, mitzvos lav lehanos nitnu, that mitzvahs were not given in order to get benefit from, and therefore this ayruv we don't make in right the halacha of an ayruv that says that you just put down some food and now you can walk an additional 2,000 amas. That's not just for you to have fun, for you to go and visit your friends and have a good time. No, the reason, ayruv is if you have a mitzvah. You have to go for whatever. Epis is a sudas mitzvah in some other city, and you need to make an ayruv so you can get there. So you can use it in the context of a mitzvah. But you're not like getting hana'ah per se, personal benefit and pleasure from making this ayruv. And for that reason, you would be allowed to use this kever in the context of the ayruv because it wouldn't be considered like you're getting hana'ah from it. And therefore, even though a kever is also ba'hana'ah, but this isn't considered hana'ah because according to Rabbi Yehuda, you'd only be creating this ayruv, you'd only be making this ayruv in the context of a mitzvah. And mitzvah slav lehanos nitnu. So, Ella, well, I guess mitzvah slav lehanos nitnu would be why you can only use it in the context of a mitzvah, and therefore it wouldn't be considered like you're getting personal benefit for it. Helhada amar Rava, but one second. Rava said, mitzvah slav lehanos nitnu. Okay, Rava, the Amora made a statement, and he said, mitzvah slav lehanos nitnu, that mitzvahs are not for getting hana'ah. Now here's the thing. Lema ketanoi. Let's actually say that this whole concept of whether or not we say mitzvah slav lehanos nitnu is actually machlokas tanoim, because apparently Rabbi Yehuda is saying mitzvos lav lehanos nitnu. Mitzvos were not given to get hana'ah, and therefore this ayruv is really only going to be, if you need to make an ayruv in the context of a mitzvah. But the rabbis who seem to be saying that you can't use a grave because you'll end up getting pleasure from it. So apparently they seem to say that you can get hana'ah from mitzvahs, and because you can get hana'ah from mitzvahs, that's why you can't use a grave, because then you'll be getting hana'ah from the grave. So it sounds like whether or not we say mitzvahs lehanos nitnu or lav lehanos nitnu is actually a machlokas. So when Rava says that mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu, apparently that's actually not agreed on by everybody. That's specifically Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, but the rabbis would argue on him. Now that's not what Rava wants to hear. Rava wants to hear that everyone agrees with his opinion. Certainly the rabbis. So lema ketanoi amar l'shmaita, right? That Rava, what he says, mitzvah slav lehanos nitnu is actually machlokas tanoim. So amalach Rava. So Rava will respond to you. No, he gives like kind of like a kind of shtickle. I would say I don't love the way that his answer is like presented, but in the end, the answer goes to like, I don't know, a few different like filters until we kind of get to the conclusion anyway. So this isn't really the final conclusion, but it says Rabbi Yisvirlu de'ein ma'arvin el dvar mitzvah duchliam mitzvah slav lehanos nitnu. Okay, so really everyone agrees, right? Rava's going to argue that everyone, both the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, agree that mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu, right? You don't get hana'ah from mitzvahs, right? And if we said, and if we were to say, if both the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda were to agree that the only reason you can make an ayruv would be for a dvar mitzvah, right? Well then, you make an ayruv just for a dvar mitzvah, all business, you're not getting any hana'ah from it. Mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu, you don't get any hana'ah. But this is what the machlokas is between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Marsavar in ma'arvin el dvar mitzvah, marsavar ma'arvin afilu dvar reshus. So actually what the machlokas is between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan is not whether or not mitzvos lehanos nitnu or mitzvos lav lehanos nitnu. It's whether or not the ayruv can only be created in the context of a mitzvah. Okay? According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can only create an ayruv for a mitzvah. If you have somewhere to go for a mitzvah, so then you can create an ayruv to extend how far you can walk. And therefore there's no concern that you're going to be getting any personal benefit from this ayruv, and therefore you can use even a grave because you're not going to end up getting personal benefit from the grave. And therefore there's no issue of getting hana'ah from the kever, which is also bana. According to the rabbis, however, you're allowed to make an ayruv for whatever reason that you want. You want to go visit your friends in the next city over, so you make an ayruv and now you can get there. So therefore, you could very well end up getting hana'ah from this mitzvah, even though the point of the mitzvah isn't to get hana'ah, but you might end up getting hana'ah from it because you're going to your friend's house. And therefore, don't use the kever because then you might, you can end up getting hana'ah from having used this kever, which is also b'hana'ah. Fine. But let's keep on going. This isn't the final answer. Ella, Hada Amar Rav Yosef, but then Rav Yosef says, Ein ma'arvin el dvar mitzvah. Well now, Rav Yosef says that you're only allowed to make an ayruv for a mitzvah. Kind of like what we're saying according to Rabbi Yehuda. You can only make an ayruv for a mitzvah, you can't make an ayruv for your own leisure. But lema ketanai. Well, now let's say that Rav Yosef's statement is actually Machlokas Tanaim, and his assertion that you can only make an ayruv for a mitzvah is actually just the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, but the rabbis would disagree. So Amr, right? So Lema Kitanoi Amr Lishmaite. So Amalach Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef would respond to you, D'chule Amma Ein Ma'arvin El Dvar Mitzvah, that both the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda hold that you can only make an ayruv for in the context of a mitzvah, if you have to go to some other city for a mitzvah. And everyone agrees that you don't get hana for mitzvahs. Therefore, and this is the important part, I think that the flow up until here was like a little bit confusing about like what exactly do they say, why do they say it? But I think here's the important part, that both according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to the Rabbana, you only make an ayruv in the context of a mitzvah. An ayruv tchumen, you would only make in the context of a mitzvah if you need to get to some other city for some mitzvah. And mitzvahs lavli hanos nitnu, you don't, right, it's not about getting hana from mitzvahs. Okay, now if that's the case, then why do the rabbis say that you're not allowed to use this grave for your ayruv? What's the problem? We explained how, nothing's going to come tameh or anything like that. You're not getting hana from this grave, so what could be the problem? This is the machlokas. Masavar kevan dukanale ayruv lo nichale demintera, masavar nichale demintera deyitztrich achile. So now here's the thing. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he says, look, somebody who's making an ayruv, he's making an ayruv to be yotzezan for the ayruv, and therefore once Shabbos starts, and halachically it's ki'ilu, he's making Shabbos wherever his ayruv is, he doesn't care about it anymore. When he walks to the next city the next day, it makes no difference to him if some animal already came and ate the ayruv. And therefore, the fact that the ayruv is on this grave, and the grave is sort of protecting and guarding this ayruv, it's just, circumstantial. Is that the word? It's a technicality. It doesn't bother him either way. And therefore, he doesn't have any intention to get benefit from this grave in terms of protecting this food that he's putting there. However, according to the rabbis, look, the person's leaving food there, and he intends that when he passes by the next day, he'll have some food that he'll be able to eat if he wants to. And therefore, he's kind of relying, right, the grave is playing a role here in this story, which is that the grave is actually protecting the food that he's putting there. And therefore, he's getting benefit from the grave. And therefore, mitzvah savlanos nitnu, and you can't get benefit from, and grave is also ba'ana, therefore you cannot get benefit from this grave, and therefore they say that you cannot use the grave for this ayruv. Okay, so that seems to be the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Really they agree in principle both that mitzvah slav leonos nitnu, as well as you can only make an ayruv for a mitzvah. The question is, what's his intention when he puts that food there? Is it that he wants the grave to guard it, in which case we have to be concerned about getting benefit from the grave, or he doesn't care, in which case it's not really a concern. New Mishnah. Ma'arvin b'dmai, and this I think is going to be super familiar. We should all be familiar. This is like the third time that this Gemara is coming up in the last, 9 months already that we've been learning Gemara together. So ma'arvin b'dmai uv'maiser rishon shenit l'trumaso. So you can make an ayruv with demai. Who can tell me what demai is? Very good. Demai is stuff that you bought from an am ha'aretz, and you don't know if you separated meiser from it. So let's say you buy a loaf of bread and you want to use that for your ayruv, but it is demai, and that would be okay. Uv'maiser rishon shenit l'trumaso, and meiser rishon, that trumas meiser was taken from it. Uv'maiser sheni v'hekdesh sheniftu, or if you have meiser sheni and hekdesh that you transfer their value onto money. V'kohanim b'chalo v'truma. Kohanim can use challah, they can use truma. Aval lo b'tevel, you can't use tevel, untithed stuff. V'lo b'maiser rishon shelo nidla trumaso, and not meiser rishon that truma wasn't taken from it, trumas meiser. V'lo b'maiser sheni v'hekdesh shelo niftu, and not meiser sheni and hekdesh that were not transferred to money. Says the Gemara, demai halo chazile. Same question we always ask. How can you use demai? You can't eat demai. Migo de I bay mafker lehu linchase v'have ani v'chazule hashtanami chazile. So the Gemara says, well, theoretically, you can just take this demai and you can make all of his possessions hefker. Then he'll be an ani, and if he's an ani, then he'd be allowed to eat demai. Titnanis we learn in the Mishnah that you can feed poor people demai. You can feed achsanya, which were like these soldiers that would come to town, and you had to and you had to feed them. And Rashi says something interesting, which is that because these soldiers aren't in their own homes, it's like they're poor people. So therefore they're allowed to eat demai. And therefore you can use demai for an ayruv, since theoretically you can just make all of your possessions ownerless, make yourself effectively an ani, and then you'll be able to eat it. So therefore you can use it for an ayruv. Amar Rav Huna, said Rav Huna, Tana b'shamay omim ein machilin es aniyim demai, u'b'sil omim machilin es aniyim demai. So it says Rav Huna that we learn in a brisa that Beis Shammai says that we may not feed poor people demai. Beis Hillel says that we may feed poor people demai. Uv meiser rishon shenit lachulei. Meiser rishon, that its trumas meiser was taken, right? So meaning what happens, everyone knows this by heart already. You have a field, the first thing you do is take truma, right, and that goes to the Kohen. Second thing that needs to happen is that meiser goes to the Levi. Now the Levi goes home and he's got his meiser that he got from your field. He takes 10% of that and gives it to the Kohen. So we're saying that if you have this meiser that the Levi has, and he's already taken his 10% and given it to the Kohen, you can use that, right? The Levi can then use whatever's left as his ayruv. So now Pshita, obviously he can use it as his ayruv. Why wouldn't he be able to? So the Gemara answers, Lo tzricha she'ekdimo b'shibolin, v'not lamimenu trumas meiser, v'lo lamimenu truma gedola. It's talking about where the Levi showed up at the field in which he was going to take, or in which he really ended up taking meiser from. Now, he got there to the field while the stalks were just still lying on the field. They weren't made into a pile yet. They were just lying on the field. And he got there before the Kohen came to take his truma. And then the Levi comes with his, sack. He fills up meiser into his sack and goes home. Now what he's got is he's got 10% of that fellow's field. And now his 10%, no truma had yet been taken out of it to give to the Kohen. So the question, and then the Levi goes and he takes 10% and he gives that to the Kohen. The question is, does he also need to account for the portion of that meiser that he took that was really meant to go to the Kohen, because truma is supposed to be taken first? So that is what we're talking about. When the Levi went to the field, went to the stalks, took the meiser, and then separated trumas meiser, but he did not separate the truma gedola that the Kohen had not yet collected. So again, lo tzricha she'ekdimo b'shibolin, it's talking about where the Levi beat the Kohen to the stalks, v'not lamimenu trumas meiser, v'lo not lamimenu truma gedola. And the Levi first took his meiser, and then he took his trumas meiser, gave that to the Kohen, but he never gave to the Kohen the 2% of the meiser that he took, which was really relevant for truma gedola that belongs to the Kohen. And we're saying that that's okay. You can still use that for your ayruv. The Levi can still use that 10% for his ayruv. That if a Levi beats the Kohen to the stalks and he takes his meiser before the Kohen took truma, Pater Truma Gedola, the Levi does not have to give Truma Gedola to the Kohen. He just gives the meiser mina meiser, the 10% of the meiser that he took. He gives that to the Kohen. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Varimosem mimenu Trumas Hashem meiser mina meiser." That the pasuk says by Trumas meiser, it says that the Levim will give meiser mina meiser to the Kohen. Meaning, the Levi takes his 10%, his meiser, and then he takes 10% of that and gives that to the Kohen. Meiser mina meiser amarti lach. V'lo truma gedola v'trumas meiser mina meiser. Says the Gemara, I told the Levim to take meiser mina meiser, to take 10% from the meiser that they took. I did not instruct them to take truma gedola in addition to the meiser mina meiser. And therefore, if they beat the Kohen to get their truma, to get their meiser, meaning the Levim take their meiser before the Kohen took their truma, so then you take meiser, and that's the end of the story. You don't owe the Kohen his truma. Says Rav Papa Tabai, well, if that's the case, that we have such an elegant limud, right? It says, right, meiser mina meiser, it says in the pasuk that you're only chayiv meiser mina meiser, not truma gedola and meiser mina meiser. Well, if that's the case, well then we should say the same thing when the Levi beats the Kohen to it, not when they're just stalks lying in the field, but when they're already piled up into a pile. But the halacha is that once they're already piled into a pile, if the Levi takes his meiser before the Kohen took his truma, well then he would still have to separate Truma Gedola from his meiser and give it to the Kohen. Well, if we have such an elegant drash, which is meiser mina meiser, that we only take that and not Truma Gedola, well then why should it matter if he if the Levi beat the Kohen to the stalks or to the pile. So Amar Lei, so Abai says to Rav Papa, Alecha Amar Kra, because we have another pasuk to respond to you, Mikom Ma'aser Seichem Tarimu Es Kol Trumas Hashem, that from all of your Ma'aser you have to take Truma. And what's that talking about? That is talking about when the Levi beats the Kohen when it's already in a pile. In that case, we say Mikom Ma'aser Seichem Tarimu, that you still have to take Truma. Umara Isa, and how come you apply the psukim in the places where you apply them respectively, meaning how come you're assuming that when there's still stalks, then the Levi does not have to give Truma Gedola to the Kohen, yet when they're already in a pile, the Levi does have to give Truma Gedola to the Kohen? So the Gemara answers, Hay idgan v'lo idgan. Once it's in a pile, it's called dagan. When it's not yet in a pile and it's just stalks, it's not yet called dagan. And it says in the context of Truma, Reishis digancha, right? That the first of your dagan, and therefore once it's in a pile and it's dagan, well then no matter what, you're gonna the Kohen's gonna get his truma even if the Levi beats him to it. But before then, it's not called dagan yet, and if the Levi beats him to it, so he doesn't have to take truma gedola. Weiter. With meiser sheni v'hektish sheniftu, and we said that you're allowed to use meiser sheni and hektish that you already transferred their value onto money. Pshita, this is obvious. If you already transferred their kedusha onto money, well then obviously you can use them. That's the whole point of transferring it onto money. So lo tzricha shenosen es hakeren v'lo nosen es hachomesh v'kamashmalan dein hachomesh ma'akev. So what it's teaching us is it's talking about a situation where he kind of redeemed them. He redeemed them, but only at their face value. He didn't add the additional chomesh, which is 25%. So meaning it's a fifth, but it's actually 25% lemaisa, at least the way that we kind of refer to percentages. So he didn't give the chomesh, and nonetheless he could still use it for his ayruv because the chomesh is not ma'akev. Aval lo b'tevel, you cannot use tevel. Pshita, obviously you cannot use tevel. It's untithed. You're chayav what? What do you chayav? I think you chayav like karis or something for each tevel. So lo tzricha b'tevel tovel midur abanon. It's talking about midur abanon tevel. Chugon shezaru ba'atzit she'enu naku. For example, if you had planted this stuff in a pot that didn't have any holes in it, and therefore it's completely separate from the ground. So I guess midur abanon, it would be considered tevel, and you use that. So and with the chiddush is you still shouldn't use it. V'lo b'maiser rishon shelo nidla trumaso. And if you have maiser rishon, that there was no meiser min, well, the assumption is that it means that meiser min meiser was not taken from it. Meaning, if you have meiser rishon, like the Levi took his meiser, and he didn't separate the 10% and give that to the Kohen. That's the assumption right now. So if that's the case, pshita, obviously you can't use that. He needs to separate the 10% and give it of truma and give it to the Kohen. So meaning 10%, which is meiser min meiser, and give that to the Kohen. Lo tzricha shekdimo bechri v'not lemimenu trumas meiser v'lo not lemimenu truma gedola. So the chiddush here, it's talking about where this time, instead of the Levi beating the Kohen when it was the stalks lying on the field, the Levi beat the Kohen when it was already in the piles. And at that point, and what did he do? He took the 10% and he brought it home, and he took another 10% and gave that to the Kohen, but he did not take the truma and give it to the Kohen. So we're saying that you're not, since the Levi beat the Kohen to his meiser, when the Levi took meiser before the Kohen took his truma, and at that point it was already in a pile. So therefore, this time it's ma'akev. It makes it's a big deal. And so I may have thought to say, like Rav Papa wanted to argue, well, we have that pasuk that says meiser min meiser, not truma gedola, and meiser min meiser. So the Gemara answers. So that what we're teaching is that the answer is like Abai answered Rav Papa, which is but we have another pasuk which says mikom meiser seichem tarimu, and that's talking about after it's been made into a pile, and therefore, since it was already made into a pile, this Levi must separate truma gedola, and if he doesn't, you cannot use that as an ayruv. V'lo b'meiser sheni v'hektish shelo niftu, you cannot use meiser sheni and hektish that were not transferred onto money. Pshita, obviously not. They're meiser sheni and hektish. Lo tzricha shepedan v'lo pedan. It's talking about where you kind of transfer them to money, but not properly. Right? V'lo pedan ki hilchazon. Meiser shepedo agabi asimon. What this looks like when it comes to meiser sheni is that he transferred the money onto some coin that doesn't have a shape, doesn't have some kind of thing like printed into it. V'rachmana Amar, the pasuk says, the Torah says, "V'tzarta hakesef, kesef sheish alav tzura." It says "V'tzarta hakesef," meaning that when you transfer the meiser sheni onto money, it has to be money that has like a form on it, and not just like a blank coin. And what he did with the hektish was that he transferred the hektish onto land, onto property. Now, hektish, if you want to be poda, you have to. It says that you'll give money. So don't transfer it onto land. So therefore, that is what it means. That if you have Meiser Sheni and Hektish Shalom Niftu, you can't use them. It means that you thought that you were podeh, but you weren't podeh properly, and therefore you cannot use those for your ayruv. Okie dokie, new Mishnah. Sholech ayruvo bi'adcher shota v'kain. Somebody who sends his ayruv with a deaf person, a foolish person, or a minor. Or someone who doesn't believe in ayrovs. And the Gemara is going to explain what that means. Eino ayruv, well, it doesn't work. Okay? But if you instructed to your friend that, hey, I'm going to send this ayruv with this person who I know I'm not allowed to send it with, but I want you to hang out over there by the location. You're going to take it from this fellow, put it down, so you're really going to be the one who puts down the ayruv, then it's acceptable. Says the Gemara, b'katan lo. The Gemara says, one second, a katan is not, you're not allowed to send a katan to put down your ayruv. V'amar Rav Huna, katan gove esa ayruv. But Rav Huna said that a katan is allowed to collect the ayruv. What does that mean? So lo kasha kan be'eruv tchumen kan be'eruv chatzeros. It depends if it's eruv tchumen or eruv chatzeros. Our Mishnah is talking about eruv tchumen. Okay? Our Mishnah is talking about eruv tchumen. Sending out a katan to go and put down your ayruv for you. And the difference is that you're actually being kona shvisa. You're actually making some kind of a kinyan on this place that this is where you're going to be for Shabbos. And a katan doesn't have the koach, doesn't have the ability to be able to make that kinyan. However, when it comes to eruv chatzeros, that isn't actually a kinyan or anything. It's really just joining everybody together. There's no like legal, avenue or something like that. The katan literally is just knocking on everybody's door and saying, hey, by the way, we're collecting stuff for the ayrovs, or, do you want to throw something in? And then he collects from everybody. But he's not actually doing anything that requires, any legal relevance. So therefore, when Rav Huna says that a katan is allowed to collect the ayruv, it means ayruv chatzeros. When our Mishnah is saying that katan, you're not allowed to send a katan to do your ayruv for you, it means ayruv tchumen, where he's actually being kona the place of the ayruv. Or you can't send it with somebody who doesn't hold of ayrovs. Like ayrovs aren't his thing. He doesn't believe in them. So man, who is this? Amar Rav Chizda Kusai. That's a reference to the kutim, right? Those fellows who, what was it? Sancherev? Somebody like kind of swapped out different populations. So he sent these kutim people to Israel, and they kept on getting eaten up by like little lions. So then, Sancher or whoever it was, the king of Ashur or something, sent like some Kohanim to Israel to like teach them about some mitzvahs, and they were kind of like, we don't trust them too much. Now, if you instructed, however, to somebody like, hey, I want you to meet this person who I know I'm not allowed to send it with, but I want you to meet this person at the location and take it from him and put it down, and you'll be the one really making the kinyan over there. So then the Mishnah says that would be acceptable. And it's talking about where his friend is like, yeah, I'll totally do that. So now, but one second, if you send, let's say, a katan to go and, bring your ayruv to that place, and then your friend's going to put it down, maybe this katan won't end up getting there. So it's talking about where the sender is able to see this katan the entire time, so he could actually see that he got there. So here also it's talking about where the sender can see the katan. But don't we have to be concerned that maybe the friend will kind of renege on or just not deliver on what he promised to deliver, i.e., he's not going to actually take it from the katan and put it down. So kedam Rav Yechiel chazaka shliachos shlichuso achanami chazaka shliachos shlichuso. It's like Rav Yechiel said that we can assume that a shaliach is going to do what he said he was going to do. If this friend said, look, I got this, I'll take it from this little guy and I'll put it down, so then we can trust him that he's going to, do what he said he's going to do. Where is this statement where are the statements of Rav Chizda and Rav Yechiel, where Rav Chizda says that he sees the little guy the whole time, and Rav Yechiel says that we could trust that a shliach is going to do what he says he's going to do? Aha itmar, it's on the following. Desanya, as we learned in the Brisa, Nisanu lapil v'olicho, lekov v'olicho, ein ze ayruv. If you give your ayruv and say, hey, elephant, I'm going to give you this ayruv, just bring it over there, okay? Good, thanks so much. I'm going to go back to doing my important things. Or maybe it wasn't an elephant. Maybe it was like a monkey. And you're like, hey, monkey guy, come here. Can you just take this and like bring it over there to make my ayruv for me? So that doesn't work. Now, if he said to somebody else, like, hey, I'm going to send my monkey, can you just take it from my monkey and put it down? So then that would be fine. But maybe the monkey or the elephant isn't going to arrive at the location. So Rav Chisda says it's talking about where you could see the monkey or the elephant the whole time. Yeah, but what if his friend maybe isn't going to do what he said he's going to do? Maybe he's not going to accept it from the monkey or the elephant. Rav Yechiel says, no, we don't have to worry about that because we can assume that a messenger, a shaliach, is going to do what he says he's going to do. Chevra, that was daf Lamed Aleph of Masechta Ayruvin. So at the beginning we talked about movable ohels. So Rebbe says it doesn't work, whereas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda say that it does work. Then we talked about putting your ayruv on a grave. That was an interesting discussion. So Rabbi Yehuda says that's fine, it works, and the Chachamim say it doesn't work. And the question is why? So we had Rava talk about mitzvah slav lehanos ninu. We had Rav Yosef talking about if you can only make an ayruv for a mitzvah. So we said, look, everyone agrees two things: that mitzvah slav lehanos ninu, and also that the only reason why you can make an ayruv tchumen would be for in the context of a mitzvah. Now the question is, this kever, this grave, you're not allowed to get hana from. It's also ba'ana. So the question is, are we concerned that you can get hana? According to Rav Yehuda, he says, look, you're not. According to Rav Yehuda, he says, look, you're not going to get hana from it because once Shabbos comes and your ayruv is there in place, you forget about it. You don't really care if it gets eaten or whatever. Like, it really makes no difference. And therefore, this kever, this grave, is not really playing a significant role in the big picture. You're just really just taking food and putting it down on the grave. Whereas according to the Chachamim, you do care that this food should be there tomorrow when you get there, and therefore the grave actually is serving a role in that it is protecting your food for you, in which case you're getting hana from a grave, therefore it's a problem and they say you can't do it. Okay, fine. Then we talked about all these different kinds of like things that you can and can't use for your ayruv, like we've also seen in terms of things that you can and can't bench on. I don't remember what was the context in which it came up in Masechta Shabbos, but it's like the familiar things, Demai, Meiser Sheni, things like that. And then we talked about making a shaliach for your ayruv, and we said that so there are certain people that you cannot trust to make your ayruv for you. Things like people like Chere, Shota, Katan. We said, however, if you can send it if you could see him the whole time, so you know that the person got there, and also if you have a friend there waiting for him, to kind of be the one to actually make the ayruv. So in those cases it would be okay. Chevra, thanks for learning with me. Have a great day. Peace out. Bye.